Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of WIRSPA's Rum Maker series, where we talk with the people who are making Caribbean rum today. My name is Matt Pietrek, and I'm here with my co-host, Devon. Today, we're speaking with Don Benn of the West Indies Rum Distillery. Welcome, Don. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Matt. I'm doing well today. It's a bright sunny day in Barbados, and happy to see both you and Devon here today. And I'm also happy to be part of this great series. Hopefully, it's an interesting conversation we can have.
I'm sure it will be, and thank you for being part of it. Before we jump into the questions, just tell us a little bit about your role at West Indies Rum Distillery. We'll talk much more about that in a bit, but just tell us briefly what your role is at West Indies.
Well, officially, I'm the operations manager and master distiller at West Indies Rum Distillery. Just a brief explanation about that. That encompasses all of our productive activities, which are the fermenting, distilling, blending, aging, and bottling of rum. And, it's a quite a large scope, but I'm ably assisted by a great team of people who manage each of those three separate areas. Fermentation and distillation is kept separately as one area. And then we have warehousing, which covers the blending and aging. And then we have bottling. So I'm responsible for everything under that operations umbrella.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're a really busy man with all of that going on.
It ebbs and flows. As I said, the team that you have around you really determines how busy it can get. So I rely heavily on the team to keep things going the way they should, and also to engage with me if they need my help. So I can't have eyes everywhere. I would like to, but it's not possible.
Wouldn't we all? Okay, so let's jump right in. As we are prone to do here, let's start at the beginning. Tell us about where you were born, where you grew up, like everything up to where you went off to universities. Start from the beginning.
Okay, and I'll try not to give any dates. I still have to. I'm not always truthful about my age, so I'll leave that one to guesswork.
I think I have at least 10 years on you, so no worries there.
At least, okay. Well, you're about 50 then. Yeah. Well, I was born and still live in Barbados all of my life. The only time I would have left Barbados for any extended period was university, but you mentioned we will have a separate discussion about that. So my early childhood and schooling was in the north of the country, an area called our parish called St. Peter. Barbados is divided into 11 parishes, so I was born and raised in St. Peter. When I graduated from what we call primary school, which is up until age 11, into secondary school, I went to a secondary school in the middle of the country in a parish called St. Michael. That school's name is Harrison College. And conveniently enough, at that time, my parents made the decision to move to a new location in the center of the country, in St. Thomas. So I left St. Peter between age 10 and 11. And then I spent, that would have been the next 7 years at Harrison College for my secondary level schooling. So after that would have been decision time to, you're getting at the age where you have to choose a career path or a specialty or expertise. So after Harrison College would have been when I left to go to university.
So where did you attend university and what was your area of study?
Okay, well, I actually spent a year in Barbados first at University of the West Indies. My intention was always to study mechanical engineering, but I had to make some choices in terms of where to study it. So when I made that final choice, it was too late to start in the year immediately after secondary school. So I did like a bridge year where I studied some of the topics, the subjects that would have helped me then when I started the university for mechanical engineering. So my choice of university was the University of Birmingham in London, and not London, in England, obviously it's in Birmingham. And I paired it with management. So I did a master's in mechanical engineering and management that lasted for 4 years at the University of Birmingham in England.
So was it always
Sorry?
Was it always your goal to enter the rum industry?
Wow. Well, I'd say no. Um, and it's a strange thing because I've been in the rum industry now for a very long time. But when I started university, I really had no thoughts of being necessarily in the rum industry. If you appreciate growing up in Barbados, maybe even other parts of the Caribbean, rum can be seen as two sides of the same coin. It's massively beneficial for the countries in the Caribbean and the different people who are involved. But obviously, there's a side to it that, because I guess of substance abuse, people don't obviously always see it in a very good light. So growing up, I was always cautioned, don't become a rum drinker, don't become a drunkard, stay away from the rum shop. So coming up and thinking that a career path was going to involve rum necessarily was not the first thing on my mind. Um, but yeah, it came to that pretty quickly after I left university, and I'm quite happy that's the decision that was taken.
So with a degree in mechanical engineering, what next? How you entered? What came next after your degree? Um,
Okay,
in
sure.
engineering?
Well, after the degree, I was still a bit undecided as to the exact career path, the business I would be involved with. I had a few options, and one of them was to stay in the United Kingdom to work. So, you can imagine a young person right out of university, you're seeing all of the opportunities ahead of you. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, this is a good place to start. I don't have any family per se or any responsibilities that had me to go back immediately to Barbados. So I applied to several jobs in the UK, but one of the conditions would have been to obtain a work permit. And in doing so, I had to leave the country to complete that application. And like any logical thinking engineer, I was like, I can't put all the eggs in one basket. So I applied to a few companies in Barbados as well. I mean, it's my home, so you never know what would happen. And two two of those applications came back positively very quickly. One of them was for our local water company, and the other was for Goddard Enterprises. And I interviewed very, very quickly with both. And Goddard Enterprises, literally the next day, told me they needed me to start the next week. And I interviewed on the Thursday. And on the Friday, they called to say, yeah, we do think we have a place for you to start on Monday. Again, I had no idea it was going to be at the rum distillery when I interviewed. Goddard Enterprises is a conglomerate that has several different types of companies um, that they manage. So one of them could have been food processing, it could have been a bakery, could have been an aerosol company. But they decided to, with my skill set and my training, they decided to place me at the rum distillery. I'm still waiting for the call from the water authority. It never came really. But by then I said, you know what, let me give it a try. I was still anticipating the call from the UK to say everything is working out and I have the work permit. And by the time that did come, I was pretty much decided, no, this is the place I want to be.
And we're all the benefactor of that
Yeah.
delay. So, so what was your first role at West Indies, and what was your first week like there?
Well, I remember very clearly the first day for sure. The first week, more of a blur. My role at the time was the assistant production manager. So implicit to that, there is a production manager. Um, those two roles no longer exist here at the distillery. We have made obviously changes over time. But then the production manager was really responsible for only fermenting and distilling. So anything to do with molasses or any of the cane juice or substrates that we would use to ferment, and then any of the distilling that was occurring, whether it be pot still or on the Felton or on the column still. And my first day, I never forget it, I came to work in a tie. That was my first and last day of wearing a tie at the West Indies Rum Distillery. Um, but when I came to work, not many people knew who I was or what I was here to do because remember, it was very quick. The interview was a Thursday, the confirmation was a Friday, and I'm turning up to work on Monday. So there was one person at the distillery who knew what I was here to do, and that person took me to an office and said, "Well, here you go. That's where you have to sit." And I really had to then introduce myself to several people as they came into the office. I think they were expecting to see someone else in that chair. So they saw a very strange young person with a tie. I was like, okay, who are you? So yeah, that first day, very, very memorable for that reason. But the first week then was like a crash course in everything I had to do, and which involved a lot of hands-on recording information, checking in with personnel, making sure the person's physically doing the distilling and fermenting had all of the tools and any equipment or resources they needed, reporting back on performance for the previous day. I mean, you've worked in a distillery, Devon, you know how that goes. There's always some information coming back from fermentation or distillation, whether it's about quality or efficiency or volumes, pressures, temperatures, the whole works, because you have to really know your data to understand how well the process is running and then to make decisions thereafter. So my role was really to manage that flow of information. So it allowed the production manager more time to oversee the entire section, rather than being stuck with lots of paper calculators. And I say papers and calculators because computers were like a new thing at that time. And I was one of the few people who understood how to work with spreadsheets and Word, not Word, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, well, anything that was in the Microsoft suite at that time. So Word, Excel, PowerPoint. There were other things like Lotus 123 and Lotus Word Pro. Those things were foreign to a lot of people. So there was one computer in the area. I was one person who knew how to use it. The others would see it and like, okay, I'm going to do it on pen and paper. So I then had to structure reports and use that computer to really trend the information and to store it.
So it sounds like a classic case of letting the new person do all the hard, tedious work for a while.
Well, I was excited to do it. I mean, I'm new. I'm not, put it this way, this is my first real job. I had, and I should go back and say, I had experience regarding enterprises before, because during my years at university, when I came back to Barbados in the summer, I did summer attachments with Goddard. So actually, when I did the summer attachments, I was at the food processing plant. So when I did the interview, half of my mind was thinking, okay, this is likely where they're going to put me because I have a familiarity with the people and the process. But it wasn't to be at that location. So yeah, I was excited to be in a new environment, learning new things. And I wouldn't just complete my paperwork and the day comes to an end and leave. I mean, the plant's running 24 hours a day. I don't have any other responsibilities. So I spent a lot of time with the guys on shift, getting to understand the process, getting to understand what they were like as persons that work with me, forming ideas in my mind based on what I saw, things that we can improve. And it's interesting working in any plant like this, because when you first come in, everything seems so complex. You're seeing several pieces of equipment, different pipe works and different things like valves and pumps and compressors. And you're like, well, how does this all work? How does this fit together? How do they keep track of what is happening? But you learn over time what's important to view, and also when you're viewing it, you can zone out or zone it to that and leave the other things to go on. If you're looking at, say, a column on a still, I'm not necessarily worried at that moment about what's happening at the pot still or the boiler. I can focus on the column on the still and understand it and manipulate it. So over time, you get that experience. But that comes from several hours of just being here at the plant and going through, tracing pipes, asking questions, not touching anything that you don't know about. Let me just be clear on that, because that can create a whole host of other issues. So yeah, that's how I learned over time. And I didn't mind the long hours with the spreadsheets and the documents, but after time that reduced as well.
So it sounds like you're pretty ambitious early on, and it seems like things changed rapidly after that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I mentioned I came in as the assistant production manager, and I think it was about just at the start of month 6 that the incumbent production manager indicated he was resigning to move on to other opportunities. And privately, when I spoke to him, he said yes, he'd always wanted to do what he went to do, but he also felt loyal enough to the company that he didn't want to leave them not having someone else there who he believed he could hand over the reins to, so to speak. And that's not to say there weren't other people here at the distillery who were very knowledgeable and knew what to do, but he always felt there would be a big, massive void if he left suddenly, and there was no one there that he could say, well, you know what, you're still learning, you can do it, but now is my time to go. So after those 6 months, he was like, yeah, I think you've proven to me that you can grasp new concepts, you understand what we're doing now, you fitted in with the rest of the team, and you're showing enough drive to, I wasn't a 8 o'clock to or 7:30 to 4:30 person, and I put down my tools and left. As I said, I stayed many hours. I would come back sometimes at night. A distillery that's running 24 hours a day, you will get a call to say something is not working. You can't direct all of those things from home. There was no connection to any of the equipment we had at home. There was limited cell phone usage. People had to call my home phone. So I didn't mind coming in, and he seemed to have an appreciation for that. So when he left, he was like, I think that you'll get the job done. You'll have the support of the others. And the thing I was looking forward to was having the support of an assistant, because I did accept the offer to become the production manager. But I wasn't so fortunate at that time to receive someone in at the same time to assist. So I had his job, which was then my job, and also my own activities to try to manage. So those initial years were tough. You're learning, but you do have a workload that's really for two people that you're one person trying to do. So one of the ways I had to really one of the things I had to learn a lot was how to delegate and how to work with the people around me, get them into a better place, meaning by training or different discussions we had, so that I had more confidence that things that might have been a problem before that I had to give my personal attention to, I could rely on the other members of the team. And only when they came to a point where they couldn't get anything done would they then let me know, so that I can be part of that troubleshooting if it needed to be troubleshooting. But it saved me enough time that I can focus on the critical things. And it eventually worked out, because as I said, it was really tough in the initial period. I had to learn a lot on my own, but that's fine. I enjoyed doing that as well, and it allowed me really to learn quickly.
So which stills were operating at the distillery when you first joined?
Right. So at West Indies Rum, there's I mean, if you both have visited here, and for those who haven't, there are quite a lot of stills we have of different types. When I came here, the 4 main stills that were running were the 2 column stills, which we call the number 79, the number 77, which is the John Doerr or Franklin still. And we also were running quite a lot the Greg Farm pot still, that's the number 73 still, and the Vulcan still, which is the number 62 still. So those are the 4 stills that were in operation, with the column stills running 7 days a week, and the Vulcan and the Greg Farm working 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, down on the weekend where we can make some changes or clean, reset it to be ready for the next week.
The Vulcan still was reinstated about 6 or 7 years ago. Why was it temporarily retired, and why reinstated?
Well, two main reasons for that. So typically at that time, we ran both the Vulcan and the Greg Farm to make our double distilled pot still. So the first distillation often would have been in the Vulcan, and the second distillation would have been in the Greg. Now, first distillation is using wash, so you could see very immediately there's a lot of wear and tear that's going to happen. the acidity, the pH levels of the wash really would attack the metal, the copper, and any other metal that's not stainless steel. And at that time, copper was really the material being used for the pot stills and the still like the Vulcan. So there was significant, far more wear and tear on the Vulcan than there was on the Greg. And because of the nature of some of the products we were making, we basically ended up with almost an overstock of our double distilled product, and did not have to really, we weren't under any pressure to keep the cycle going of Vulcan and Greg and Vulcan and Greg. So we made a decision after several attempts to repair the steam coil and the other parts of the still that were leaking. We said, you know what, this isn't proven to be worth the effort at the moment. So we stopped it. We knew it could always be restarted, but we said, you know what, let's focus on other things that we need to focus on. And the Vulcan was basically put to it was mothballed really at that time. But with knowing that it could always be restarted after some other effort went in to correct some of the issues.
So here you are, you're maybe a year into being the production manager, and it seems like other things came your way, like even more responsibilities came your way. Tell us about those.
Yeah, well, it wasn't quite the year. I spent maybe the first 3 years, I would say close to 3 years in that role of production manager. But then there was a further change in our organization where we had a vacancy at engineering manager. The person moved on again. Now, with my background in engineering, I was also thought to be, well, maybe you are best suited to fill this role. It would be easier to find someone else to do the production manager role. And we actually ended up filling the production manager role internally. And the benefit of that was me as an engineer manager, knowing the process well, by then, well enough, I could work very closely with the new production manager and ensure the response time to issues was even better than it was before. So that was the new responsibility I had. I moved from really production more into engineering, but I never really left with production because I would still want to check in with the guys and the ladies that were working and be sure everything was working well. I still had a loyalty to that area, but clearly I had to focus as well on new things with making sure equipment was installed and maintained properly. And equipment doesn't mean mechanical equipment alone. It was just anything that was an asset for the plant. So the buildings, could be electrical, it could be mechanical, anything at all, vehicles as well, that would fall under the engineering manager's responsibility. Shortly after that, only a couple more years, we looked at our overall structure and felt it's not efficient based on the skill set and the training of the people we have. So we decided to form then an operations department. And that operations department really then was to have a engineering manager and a production manager reporting into a operation manager. So I indicated I was interested in the role and I was successful at being the person chosen. So we then strengthened the team a bit by bringing in a new person, an engineering manager, and also some other people came into the production team. But now we had an operations department, but it was really for engineering and production, which is fermentation and distillation at that time. So I would say maybe another 2 years after that, that further changed and operations became, okay, operations is now fermentation, distillation, blending, aging, and bottling. Sounds like a lot, but the good thing was that engineering came out of the operations and we had a separate function for engineering because we added to the engineering as well. We added security and health and safety as well to engineering. So we really needed someone to just focus on that. And the operations was said to be anything production related. Once we bring in molasses and we're making rum and we are transforming that rum somehow, whether it be through aging or blending, and we have it in a bottle, and then obviously anything associated with that, logistics, shipping, inventory. Sorry, my role does cover now anything associated with the making of rum and getting that to where it needs to go to, whether to be to a distributor, end user, or another intermediate in the chain that will then reprocess that rum further.
West Indies Rum had many systems and equipment upgrades from since your time there. What are some of the notable projects that make West Indies Rum what it is today?
Yeah, Devon. That's a very long list. I can pick out a few for now to help. And it's changed across the board. I would say the biggest change for me, there's been several that are process related, but the people have changed a lot over time. I mean, I went through some of the structural changes we did go through, and we, as I said before, we now have a team that I think is second to none. I think our team here is an excellent team, full of enthusiasm, full of knowledge, and full of skill. And we add to that by making sure they're trained adequately to do the jobs that are expected to keep producing those great rums. So, and that over the years, I came in as a very young person. You know, I always felt it was challenging at first for me to grasp things and be part of a team. So one of my things that I really think about is how is it for new people coming into the distillery now? How can we make their experience far simpler, where they feel onboarded and they feel valued from as early as possible? I mean, sometimes it does not work. I mean, that's granted in any situation, but the idea is that the majority of people who come, even if they leave in some time afterwards, feel that they benefited from the time here, and they're leaving a better person, a more knowledgeable person than when they started. So those are some of the things we've really done a lot on with really how we manage the people, what we do with training, and just overall education. On the equipment side, I could tell you when I first started, reliability was an issue for sure here at the distillery. We've been here since 1893, and some of the equipment has been here around that same time. Some of the equipment even predates the distillery itself. So just being sure that everything is working is time intensive. You have a team of engineers, staff, technicians who have to repair, but they also have to install, and they have to maintain, they have to prevent things from going wrong. So we've done a lot of work to improve our reliability, whether it be with the new boilers, with the electrical system, with the different styles of pumps we have, new cooling towers, improvement to our bottling line, all across the board. Even departments that I'm not like directly involved with which is like accounts and our quality assurance. We've done a lot of upgrading in our quality assurance area by bringing in new GCs and other analytical equipment that would allow us to really be able to monitor quality and make the right decision if we do have anything that's not going well. Because rum quality, it's really a test of your senses, your taste, and your nose, your organoleptic senses. But also analytically, you have to be sure it's falling within a particular specification if you or the customer has that. So the worst thing you can be doing is making the rum and you think it's great, you're ready to go. And when it reaches the customer tells you, I'm sorry, that's not what we expect to receive. So we have to put a lot of time into testing here before it really then is given the approval to leave. So our QA section has been really upgraded over time. And our accounts obviously using different types of software packages, because as I said before, distillery is about how you manage a lot of that information you have. If you can't manage your information, you're not going to be well informed to make decisions. You make the incorrect decision, it could be consequential for your finances, and ultimately it could also be consequential for the business. So, but yeah, lots of improvements, changes over the time.
On that same topic, one of the biggest and most successful projects WIRSPA has been involved with over its 50-plus year history was the Caribbean Rum Sector program, which essentially, there's a whole lot where we don't have time to go into here, but essentially it created funding for WIRSPA member distilleries in the Caribbean to upgrade key systems, equipment, processes, and things like that. I dare say that a lot of the distilleries today wouldn't be in the same place they are today without this program having sort of gave them some sort of financial assistance at a critical moment. From your perspective, what were some of the key programs at West Indies that benefited from the rum sector program?
Yes, and Matt, thanks for raising that particular subject. You're quite right. This was an invaluable program that WIRSPA embarked upon, and for sure, a lot of Caribbean rum distilleries benefited. And I can safely say we are where we are because of that program, partially, obviously, but in large part to that. It allowed us to, as I said before, ensure reliability in key business areas, and it allowed us then to grow our customer base and expand our portfolio of products. If I had to pick out a few projects that really stand out, I would say our upgrade of our electrical system. And one thing you do not want in any distillery or any environment where there's a hazardous vapor or any substance that is flammable is the risk of fire. And I can tell you, electrical or poorly installed electrical equipment or poorly maintained electrical equipment can be a key source of that initial spark that then creates a fire or an explosion that can destroy lives and equipment. So we went through a massive undertaking where we assessed the standard of our installations and realized it was meeting a standard that was outdated. So it was not eminently dangerous, but it wouldn't be how something modern would have been installed and built. So we had to install a new motor control center, new transformers, new breaker panels. We had to change all the wiring in the plant. One section of the plant had to be upgraded to deal with a higher voltage, again for more energy efficiency. So it took us years actually to complete. And I know we're on a sound footing because electrical power is at the center of any process like this of this nature. If you cannot generate it or you cannot distribute your power safely, you're not going to do anything else. Everything else on the plant runs based on electricity. So that was central to a lot of what had to be done. Upgrading our boilers, obviously trying to be more fuel efficient and reliable. Again, for the distillation process, especially, steam generation is key. If you have electricity and you can generate steam and you have adequate coolant, you can deal with the things in between. But anytime your steam generation or your ability to cool is not reliable or not sufficient for your process, I would go as far as to say you're wasting time. So we focused on those big areas a lot with the WIRSPA program. Through the EU, we did an upgrade to our cooling. We did upgrades to our steam equipment, our steam generating equipment, our boilers. We did upgrades and reinstallations on our electrical circuits. Other things that benefited, we also did an expansion to our spent wash outfall. That was key so that we can maintain compliance with that. We even upgraded our software for our engineering team and our manufacturing software, which governs our bottling plant and our warehouse. So, typically it was a very manual hands process where you wrote everything down, you calculated on spreadsheets, but it wasn't a known manufacturing software. We now have that where we can store formulas, we can create batches, we can schedule and plan production, we can assess if our inventory is adequate for the forecast we have. All of that's now done using a non-standard system, as opposed to someone with bits of paper and calculator, and you're hoping they get it accurate, or they did it, but they can't remember where to put the paper down. They have to do it again. So things like that, really, the foundation of the company was secured with that program. And after that, then we could add in any other projects that really allowed us to keep growing. So we're eternally grateful for that project being done by WIRSPA.
Yeah, when sort of enthusiasts, when we think about distilleries and we think about equipment and rum making, we tend to focus on, the stills and the fermenters and all those sort of things that are sort of very visible to us as enthusiasts who are trying to understand, why a distillery's rum is the way it is. But when we were talking before this interview, you mentioned, something that's, maybe less glamorous, but vital in making good rum is automation and monitoring of these processes. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. And I didn't leave that out on purpose, but that's actually a good reminder, because that's one of the projects that we did with WIRSPA as well for our distillation process, where we upgraded our automation. And it was a significant upgrade. As I said, when I first came to the distillery, things were done very manually. Now, we did have recording of information from the process, but this was done on physical paper charts, meaning you had a sensor in the field, in the plant, and that made a connection back to a central control room, and it connected to a chart that was rotating, and there was a pen that moved up and down as the chart moved, either linearly or the circular.
Yeah, I've seen that. It looks like a record player,
Right.
like on the
Yeah.
wall.
So the record player one we've used a lot on the pot still, so you see that. But there are others that are going to just be a strip of paper going across,
Okay.
and a pen that goes up and down based on where the level is. So as the paper moves, it inscribes on the paper, and then you come back the next day. You have to pull out the whole unit. You take the chart off, and you roll it out, and you're like, okay, I can see where this pressure went and where this temperature went. The worst thing to happen was something to go wrong. Or one of the worst things. There could be several worst things. Something to go wrong, and it involves maybe 3 or 4 parameters. So you're pulling a chart out, and you're like, okay, let's go back to the other one. The third one. There were many times I had to actually physically cut the paper out of the chart, restick it so the chart kept rolling, and take the 4 pieces of paper I wanted and lay them on a bigger board and stick them, and then do an analysis in time. So I had the equivalent time. What could make things even more challenging on top of that was if for some reason the pen was too faded or the pen lifted from the paper. So you can lose hours of data if someone didn't pay attention to that. So it was very, very challenging to troubleshoot. You're always looking to troubleshoot in a distillery of this nature. Things will not run the same every day. You accept some level of variation, that's fine. But when it goes outside the range that you expect, then you have to troubleshoot. It can be as simple as discussing with persons so that you can understand what they've observed, or you need to look back at the history from the recorders that you have. So doing that manually, sometimes we went for several days before we actually understood what the root cause of the problem was. So an upgraded instrumentation allowed us to do 2 things. It allowed us to capture more data so we can install more instruments across the plant. So things that we always wanted to know that we just didn't have a probe there, we install the probe. So it could be something as simple as what's the level in this tank, or what's the temperature in this line that's taking liquid from one column to the next. So that was a really big step forward. And the other thing that was happening was that we can now store the data, and it could be trended real time. So we had graphs that were always comparative real time for the operators to see. They could always see for the last hour everything that was happening on the still. So they could not just see something instantaneously, they could see the trend. And me as a senior person, I could come in and also monitor what happened over the last week, the last 2 days. It didn't matter the length of time. It was configurable. I can decide I want to see what this temperature did against this pressure, or what this flow rate did against this height. It was an amazing change in the capabilities of our process, and our operators absolutely loved it. It allowed them to have a bit more energy when they left work, so they didn't have to, to walk around as much, but they could still monitor the process effectively. And if they needed to respond, they knew exactly where to go to. I can prepare the reports quicker so that all of our team knew what was happening. And if we had any challenges, we always could find where that was. So having that change was a big step forward for the distillery. It didn't make the job any less exciting, but it made it less tiring. Because I could tell you, coming in sometimes in the middle of the night and then you're here for several hours, 16 hours plus in a day, you're still trying to find a problem. You haven't found it yet. Those moments decreased significantly once we upgraded our instrumentation. So we did the distillation first, and shortly thereafter, we also went into to do the same thing in our fermentation process.
Is music to my ears as a former software engineer who
Okay.
at some point worked on distributed systems, and everything
Right.
you said is absolutely true in that universe as well, of what the heck happened. And at some point you realize that it's like the making stuff work correctly is the 10% of the work, and figuring out what went wrong is the 90% of the work.
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Before Maison Ferrand bought West Indies in 2017, there was sort of a perception amongst some enthusiasts that West Indies at the time was, by that point, was really just making very light rum, light column distilled rum, nothing interesting, and really just making them for brands like Malibu. True or false?
Categorically false. It's interesting you mentioned this because I still think there's still some people who have that perception, unfortunately. And I don't know the root of it. Let me just say that. But I will say for me personally, it was an eye opener for me after we were purchased by Maison Ferrand, because one of the things that happened after being purchased by Maison Ferrand was that I did a bit more traveling or connecting with people in the world of rum. You know, I up until then it was very much only focused at okay, what's going on at the distillery, how are the people here working, how's the plant working, but very little about what was going on, what were the discussions going on by people. I mean, I knew about the industry trends, I kept abreast of what was happening in the industry in general, but I really had a limited view of what people thought of our distillery. So having heard that over time now, I'm like, well, okay, obviously some part of that blame could go with us here at the distillery because we really didn't spend a lot of time trying to educate people about what we do. We're doing that a lot more now, and we're seeing the benefit of it, obviously, with people having a deeper understanding. They're excited to come to Barbados to visit the birthplace of rum, and they don't just visit West Indies rum, they visit all distilleries, but at least they come to West Indies rum eager to learn and not with a misconception that, okay, that place just makes um, extra neutral rum for one customer and it doesn't understand anything about the history of rum or understand what people want to see in a rum. So over time, I mean, when I say over time now, over the time I've been here, I've had obviously a front row seat to see what we're capable of doing. There's so much that we can do. As I said before, there's several stills here, different styles of rum. My personal favorite still is actually not the pop still or the Vulcan. My personal favorite still is the John Doerr Franklin still, the number 77. It is the most versatile still we have. Uh, we run it in several configurations from single column mode up to all 5 columns working. There's several styles of rum we made from it. It is the still that when the product comes off, I can sit and nose it for the longest time before even tasting it. I absolutely love the character and the body that comes off. And it depends on how many columns we're running, obviously. The larger still, the 17.9, we can manipulate it as well because that's a skill in itself, being able to manipulate the settings and the operation of a column still to get the type of product that you want. The pot still, very, very interested, but a lot of that will then depend on what are you doing at the fermentation stage. The fermentation stage really can govern then what happens for a pot still and the product thereafter. I guess there's some things you can do at the still, but a lot of it is driven with if you don't make it in fermentation, you're not going to get it out at the end. What I love about the Franklin still is even with varying fermentation, how that still is set up, we can still be clever enough in how we operate it to keep the product how we want. So yeah, those are misconceptions that I would hope people will come and see for themselves. They can taste the products on the shelf, yes. I mean, you can taste the Plantaray rums, the stage rum, but you can do yourself a big favor and come and physically see what we do. Take a tour through our warehouses, taste some of the rums directly from the barrels, and have a deeper understanding that this distillery here since 1893 is as capable as any other distillery in the world to make any style of rum. And our people are not, say, ashamed to say that, yes, we do make rum for other customers to their specifications. If you, Matt Pietrek, came to say, Don, this is a rum I really like. You want this amount of ester and this amount of propanol, and it's not a rum I personally like. I'm not going to tell you, I'm sorry, man, I'm not making that. I'm going to say, Matt, you know what? Leave it with us. We're going to make that rum exactly how you want. We pride ourselves in having that skill to get you what you need. Obviously, once it's still a rum, you're not going to make you something that's called, I don't know, whiskey or some other product. But we know what we're capable of. It ranges from, yes, some of on the cleaner side and some on the very heavy estery side, and anywhere in between.
Okay. Yeah. So I may just take you up on that offer
Okay.
to make me a custom rum. So, sticking with sort of recent history here, which West Indies was involved with, one of my favorite topics to write about, and still surprises a lot of people, is the rum cover over, and it's a complex topic, but can basically be boiled down for here in this context as is essentially from about 2010 onwards, certain basically the distillery, the large distilleries of the U.S. In the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, the large distilleries started receiving a significant amount of effectively a subsidy that basically they effectively by way of their taxation of the rum essentially got some of that back and essentially uh, gave them a financial advantage over their competitors who were not those distilleries. Obviously, this had an effect across many of WIRSPA members. What was the impact of that on West Indies?
Yeah, cover over. It's two simple words, but it can have quite an effect when you tell it to to people here in Barbados, at least at the distillery. It can be seen as a trigger word. Yeah, it had a big impact for us, especially because our model of business at the time was, we're going to be crafting rums for several customers. We did have our own brands at the time going into bottles, but that was not the majority of the production we made. We had done a lot of direct contact with customers, especially in North America and the US, to reach out to them and say, listen, if you really need a rum, we are the person to come to. We can create a rum for you. We can match any blend that you want to match. And we can then send you the rum and you're free to obviously do your bottling or further blending. So when I came here, our managing director at the time used to spend a lot of time in the US engaging directly with customers. He was very much a face-to-face person. He wanted to be sure the customers knew they were valued and we were paying attention to them. So a lot of our business was built on the strength of that. So when the cover over, which has always been in existence for a long time, but obviously over time, and especially in that 2010 time, it evolved quite substantially. A lot of our customers in the US, I mean, they call us to say, we really like working with you. We've never had problems, but if we look at buying something and the cost is less than half of what we pay or some enormous percentage, that's profit margin they can't look away from. And we were in no position to fight it really. I mean, the analogy that we use quite a lot is, the three of us here are starting a race, a 100-meter dash, and Matt, you're given a 120-meter head start. So there's always going to be one winner. You've won the race before we've even started to run. And so for us, it was, what's the point of trying to run the fast? We couldn't run fast enough to catch up. You just were already past the finishing line. So it just meant a shift in our focus. We had to really accept that position. And there were some US customers that stayed with us. So we're happy for those. And we had to become more aggressive at seeking other markets, and starting the transition of putting more rum into bottles. But obviously that hasn't been the end point we've reached as yet, because we are still able to make more rum and shit than we can necessarily fill here in Barbados. But we've worked through it. It was a challenging time, so we did have to go through some periods of stopping the plant, laying off staff. Unfortunately, we went through a couple of restructuring exercises because of that. But we are happy where we are at this stage. I mean, notwithstanding the present business environment, which is another moment in time where there's great uncertainty. But we feel confident if we put our heads together and work together, we can also make it through this one, as we did with that initial period of cover over.
Right. And just for those who aren't familiar with cover over, it's still in effect today that
Yeah.
these distilleries in USVI and Puerto Rico are receiving every year literally hundreds of millions of dollars, which gives them a financial advantage over distilleries, other
Yeah.
competitive distilleries in that space. So it's still going on today, but
It's still going on. We think what it was initially 30 years, so they're about
yeah,
halfway
30 years.
through
So I think we have
that
at
initial
least
agreement.
another, yeah,
Yeah,
like at
so
least another 20 years or something, or 15 years of it.
exactly. So we
But yeah,
couldn't sit down for 30 years and say, "Oh man, we're gonna complain and wait till it's finished." We had to find a way to survive. Obviously, I would like to know, or not know, but if we're made aware that it is being reconsidered, or if there are other eyes looking at it now, we'd appreciate that. But I think to constantly try to change it now is more than an exercise in futility. You've got to really press on and try to be adaptive to the environment now.
yeah, and that is something that at the time WIRSPA was pivotal in trying to work against it, trying to testifying about the impact it would have on other distilleries there. That's one of the things that WIRSPA does for its member
Yeah.
distilleries. Right.
Yeah, we
So
know we know they advocate very strongly,
yeah,
WIRSPA, for issues that affect, and just it doesn't have to be the whole group being affected. It could be one or two distilleries. So we know there's efforts in the background to try to find the right operating environment or change it to suit our needs best. But I think our WIRSPA also appreciate that's one of the tougher scenarios that they're going to face, because it is beneficial to the territories that benefit from it, meaning mainly the USVI and Puerto Rico. So they're equally, I guess, agitating for it to remain. Um,
yeah,
it's
and
just
we're
one of
and
those
we're
things that is so tough. You just have to see it and move on to something else if you
right.
can.
Right, and I think recently we saw even the beer industry, an aspect of the beer industry was started to lobby against it.
Okay, well, maybe their voice can help. We'll see.
Yes. Jumping forward a few years to 2017, when Maison Ferrand buys West Indies, we see a burst of new activity. No surprise to anybody who knows Alexander Gabriel. What are some of the highlights? And focusing on like the new stills and fermentation. What are some of the highlights of these post 2017 editions?
Wow. Well, it's been quite the whirlwind for the last, that's what, 8 years now. You wouldn't think it's that long, because it's always something going on, as you said correctly. With Alexander, it is quite busy. He's this type of mindset that he doesn't want to be standing still. He's always thinking of something new. I mean, it's not just his ideas. Obviously, we are all free to put in. As he says, ideas can fight, so not people. We sit very much across tables and let our ideas battle each other. But yeah, there's been quite a few changes. I'll say the first, though, the primary change is really the change in mindset or philosophy. Um, and I think I mentioned it when we were chatting earlier about when I mentioned about garden enterprises. Is that willingness to be more outreaching, to connect with the I won't even say customers, but just the persons who are interested to know about rum. And even those who may not know about rum, but to really reach out to them and show them who we are, educate them about what we do, and be creative in expressing what we can. It's not just going to be standard products that are the same every year. You can always look forward to something new and exciting, a new expression, a new packaging, a new line extension, anything like that. So all of our team is really encouraged to be on board with that. And I think that's the biggest change that has occurred in the last 8 years. As I said, I've done more outreach or master classes and traveling in these 8 years than I did in the preceding um, 18 years. So that's one big change. Now, in terms of things that we're doing at the distillery, Devon asked about the Vulcan and why it wasn't why it was put down for that length of time. Trust me, Alexander was one of the first people to say that has to work again. I know what it is. I want to see it work. It's the only one of its kind, the original that's still in existence. And looking at it, you would not think something is wrong with it. So it was close enough to being workable. And we told him, well, yeah, we'll need to get a new coil. We need to fix this flange leak. We need to install this new valve here and there. And he was like, sure, go ahead. And we did. So when he was very excited to know that it was working again. And once that one was finished, it was, well, okay, what else can we do? So we then had the design and installation of the hot pot. That came about 2 years after the Vulcan was resurrected. That's another pot still. And one of the big ones was the commissioning of the Rockley still, which had sat on the lawn over near our warehouses for several years. When I came to the distillery, it was on the lawn sitting there. It was not functioning. And I don't think there were many people at the time who knew what it was, but Alexander and Andrew especially did some research and dug and dug and dug to find out, okay, where did this still come from? Where did it last work? We had someone to review who said it could arguably be the oldest existing pot still in the world for rum. And Alexander was like, well, he knows some people that can put their hands to it and see if they can get it back into full working condition. So it left Barbados for about 18 months. It could be around that actual number. It was close to 18 months. I visited the team that was doing the restoration. I was quite amazed that just with limited tools, but a lot of skill and expertise, they could really reshape and varnish and polish and get things back up to working standard. We always were confident it could work because of the thickness of the copper, but there were some materials that were used to seal most of the rivets that we weren't sure if it was now food grade or compatible with alcohol to the point that it wouldn't be a danger to persons to consume after. So once they made all of those changes and it came back to Barbados, we did a commissioning with the kind or the gracious acceptance of the Prime Minister. She was the one who did the official stamp to say it's now a working still again. And we've been quite happy with the products from it. And, we are going to have some expressions out there in the near future that will be exclusively Rockley. We've now also been a lot more focused on sustainability and energy efficiency. Alexander is of the mind. And as I said, that's a philosophy that we all share, that, you have to be a responsible business entity. Wherever you can, we can reduce our carbon footprint. We can be respectful of the environment, respectful of labor and persons. Safety is number one. And along with then efficiency and production and energy, those are two things that are key for us that we can produce and use as little energy as possible to make those products. So about 3 years ago, going into the 4th year now, we would have significantly changed our main wash column to become a vacuum column. It can now run on its own as a standalone column if needed to. And it can be a variety of products that we can get from the different draws, but it's now also integrated within our general distillation process, that it provides distillate that then further goes into the process to then be either, well, not controlled, but we can make further changes to match the typical quality that we normally do, or make it to a specification that the customer requires.
Right. And my
So
understanding that's to make a heavier, like a focus, it allows to make a really good high quality heavy rum.
yes, so the difference between that and the previous column we had was it we didn't have any rectification on the first column. This has a small section that, well, not small, a very large section that can do rectification. So we can control the strength as well as control the congener profile. We can withdraw streams, and there are 8 product draws that we can take different stages. So as I said, it can run as a standalone column in its own. So there's a stripping and rectification section, and in the rectifier we can draw products off, or we can take side streams that are then recirculated or added back to some other part of the process. And it then can take that product and store, or that product can be then continue to be distilled to make another product that we're accustomed to making. So it's added some versatility, and it's far more energy efficient than what we had before.
Right. Let's talk a bit more about the nursery. Okay.
Yeah.
A big swimming pool full of wild yeast. Were there any challenges in maintaining it and keeping these yeast healthy and keeping them alive?
Yeah, there is a big challenge there. So I wouldn't quite say it's a swimming pool, because I think people would be tempted to come and dive in. I wouldn't want to have to fish anyone out of that. But yeah, it's how we have it built. It's an above ground structure, and it's concrete, yes, and it's lined with an epoxy that allows us to protect the concrete around it. It still needs a lot of maintenance over time, because the liquids that we are using as the basis for the yeast to grow are quite low in pH and very aggressive against any concrete or stone structures. But it really ends up being a bouquet for the distillery and how we use it. It's basically the starter yeast that we then use in our fermentations that will go through most of our pot stills. So remember what I said, fermentation is a key element of most distilleries when they're working with pot stills. So we've created an environment, and where the nursery is located, it really captures the natural flora. So any yeast or organisms that are floating in the air, very close to the beach, we have a lot of plant life to that's more like southwest of the distillery. And we know when we look at that nursery, we don't put any cultured yeast there. I mean, but when you analyze it, you can see colonies of yeast and bacteria growing. It's not the same as what's done really in Jamaica. I know some people have that misconception, but it's really for us to allow a space that is open at the moment, that allows any natural flora, any yeast in the environment to come into a space. It has enough food. So we do seal it with some small amount of molasses or sugar, that it can then continue to grow. But once it's growing and active, we take a small amount of that and add to a fermenter to allow the fermenter to get going. And that yeast then multiplies, the bacteria multiplies. We don't expect high concentration of alcohol when we finish, but there's high concentration of flavor when the fermentation is finished. But it's interesting to look at it in action, because it doesn't need a lot of hands-on attention. You're really looking at it every day. You can look at the surface and see the colonies form on the top. You may see the odd bubble appear at the surface, because there's that release of the different gases, especially the carbon dioxide from lower levels, and that makes its way to the surface. But you're never going to look at it and it looks like a raging fermentation that you could see in some other distilleries.
And my understanding is it's somewhat unique in the Caribbean. Like it's not a muck pit in Jamaica. It's not dunder. It's not cane acid. It's sort of it's a lot of yeast that a lot of natural yeast that you can that you can start a fermentation with and not have to wait days for it to come from the air around it. But it's sort of like you have a big old pool of wild yeast ready to go in and jumpstart your fermentation. It's kind of, would you say that it's almost unique around other Caribbean rum makers?
Well, I can't say that conclusively because I know some people keep certain things secret, so I can't say I know what's behind the curtain for every distillery. But in my travels around the Caribbean, no, I haven't seen anything similar. Um, but I'm sure after knowing what we do here or seeing it, other countries or other distillers are having similar ideas, because as I said, it does capture a lot of what is in the environment. Yes, there's yeast from other places. Obviously, if you're going to put things like cane stalks in there, there's yeast from plants that can go into it. And we do have to monitor it and maintain its pH. The balance of the pH, I think, allows the yeast and the bacteria to thrive. But I would say if anybody wants to do it, you can attempt it. And you might be pleasantly surprised at what you capture from your environment that then makes your product have that more of a special signature after it's made.
So another interesting aspect of West Indies Rum Distillery is its now famous vault, which contains records that the distillery kept back to when it was founded in 1893, if I remember correctly. Alexander Gabriel talks about it quite a bit and references the documents in there. From your perspective, like how much does the vault, and now sort of like is open and you have access to these old documents, how much does it impact how West Indies makes rums today?
Yeah, the vault's a very interesting story. For us here at the distillery for many years, most people just walk by. And when we say vault, it is literally a vault. There is a massive door with it's about 6 studs. Each stud is about maybe 2 inches across. That lock, if you can get the mechanism closed, it physically locks in like how a bank vault would. And then you have to remember the combination to be able to unlock it. And I can tell you right now, there are only 2 people at the distillery that know the combination. I'm one of them. When I came, there were 4 people at that time who knew the combination. But we tried not to lock it so much because people didn't really enter it. We used it as an archive room, but without always knowing what was there before. So if I had documents, to store, I go and put them in. But I wouldn't take the time to like, okay, let's see what's fully in here. So it's quite a surprise when we say, hang on, this room is getting to the point where it's full. Let's take everything out and be sure we understand the full extent of what's in here. And we were very surprised to see some of the records that were maintained there. Designs, chart recordings, as I said, of the temperature profiles from past distillations, especially on the pot. Minute books and share registers from the inception of the distillery across the first half of the life of the distillery. Handwritten minutes and very, very cursive handwriting, because I don't think that style of handwriting is done much anymore. You're so accustomed to working with a computer or some device, people's handwriting skills are not maintained in the same way. So it has a wealth of information. Some of the designs I've seen in there, and these are things that have been built at the distillery before, or things that were planned but never fully executed. Then there's the history of what the distillery went through, how it engaged with the Barbados government and other customers on island. All of that's captured in the minutes. So it's allowed us to really have a deeper understanding of, okay, what are some of the capabilities of the distillery that are still here in a way, but we don't practice them right now? And what are the things that we can use from there to help us make decisions on what it is we want to do in the future? And we've actually used twice so far designs from in the vault to help make changes or installations with the distillation equipment. We've discussed about seawater fermentation a few times. I mean, we've tried a few things in the vault that are like, hang on, this is interesting. We'll keep that handy because there'll be a time when we want to maybe do it on a larger scale. We are not complete with that review because some of those documents were so old, we had to hand them over to the National Archive and the museum to be able to help us to sift through them because they required a particular way of handling, so we wouldn't destroy the documents in our attempt to see what they were. So our managing director, Andrew Hassel, is the main person who sees after that. He's very knowledgeable about everything so far that has come out of the vault. And we've converted the space now to like a showcase. You can visit the distillery, and when you go into the vault, we've returned some of the key documents that are sturdy enough to withstand being put back there. And it's enough for any person to see some of the history of what, because people hear us describe it and are like, you guys are kidding, right? But when they get here and they see it, they're like, wow, that's amazing. That some of that history is so well preserved. And trust me, we're very excited to see some of these things come to life again in terms of the designs that are there for some of the stills.
Let's go back to the process a bit. I know we spoke a bit about the nursery and the effect of the wild yeast and the fermentation. Are there any other environmental conditions or unique environmental conditions at West Indies rum that we say make the rum unique?
Yeah. Again, some of this is not backed up by like hours and days of scientific data, but for sure, being close to the sea, I think, is the biggest environmental impact. I'm sure every distillery across the world has its own microclimate, wherever they're located. That's influenced by the topography, by where you are relative to the ocean, how much rainfall you get, how the wind blows, etc. But for sure, the biggest impact, I think, is being so close here to the sea. For sure, one of the things that a lot of people don't remember or maybe never knew was that we, for a very long time, pumped all of our water out of the ground to use in our process. We had our own wells sunk because the land that the distillery owns is quite expansive. This area is called Spring Garden because there are so many natural springs and the water table is reasonably close to the surface. So when I first came to the distillery, one of my jobs was actually every morning I had to go and measure the height of each well. Every morning, I physically had to go walk to the well. Sometimes I rode a bicycle. I took a ruler. I had to measure the height of the well, and I could always tell if we had enough rainfall inland or not because it was like a 4 to 6 months pattern where high rainfall, you will see in another 4 to 6 months, the level in the well rise, and low rainfall, you see it drop. So we do still get water from the area, but not in the exact same manner because now there's a water desalination plant built on some of the property that we formerly owned. And they now also take the water out of the ground and they then supply that into the mains, and we take the water from the mains. So having use of that type of water is impactful for fermentation as well as what we did with blending. Many years ago, I don't know about this one, but many years ago, this predated me, where we stored rum was so close to the water that apparently from time to time the water would come into the space and you would come back and see barrels floated in the water. I would have loved to taste the rum from then to see if some of the seawater made its way in or if it was just the natural agitation from the floating that made a difference. We do have some spaces in the distillery that I can tell you, if you taste rum from that space and then taste the same rum that was maybe produced in the same time and the same age from another area, there are distinct differences. So a lot of what we do here, I know, is very unique to our location. But I think the main thing is just that ability to capture the yeast from the natural space that really impacts our fermentation. I can almost close my eyes. You can do a blind test if you want to test me on this, and put a series of rums, and I can tell you which ones were made here. Just from how I know our distillates, the aromas that we get when they come off our stills.
It's interesting. Well, you spoke to us a lot about your transition from assistant production manager to into production, into engineering, and now into operations. walk us through a normal day of Don's life at West Indies Rum now.
Oh, no. Okay, I was going to
Now.
say the normal before was it's quite different. I haven't walked to check the level in any well for a long time. So now it's okay. I'll go back to what I said before. I have to rely heavily on the team we have. It's really important for me to rely on them because the people I work with they have to enjoy what they do. They can't think I'm just standing over them, looking over their shoulder. I give them that leeway to learn, make mistakes, obviously within reason. What we don't want is obviously repeat mistakes, but people have to learn something. Just getting their own experience is key. So I do spend more of my day now engaging directly with the people who are physically now out on the plant, whether it's distillation, fermentation, warehouse, bottling. We do meetings in person on the computer. I From time to time, I don't have to do it as often. I would go and physically now see what is happening on the plant floor. But if you just want a typical day, first thing in the morning, I check in with each supervisor or each person that's in charge of each area. They're going to give me a brief summary of a recap of the day before, what they have planned today, any particular issue that they're having, maybe they can't get resolved or is pending resolution. So they're just keeping me updated. Right after that, we have a full team meeting, which involves engineering, quality, and all three of the operations area, where it's more engineer focused because we have to understand what they're working on and update them on if there's anything concerning that they need to attend to. And obviously, if it's any emergency that's going to come in to supersede any of that, we are mindful that, okay, this can change because any emergency has to take priority. Um, Typically, that's going to be by 9:30. I mean, my day is going to start around 7:30 or 8. By 9:30, that update cycle has finished, and now it's time to really nose and taste some rum. So we will normally start with what was produced there front. So you're speaking about pot still, column still. You're going to look at fermentation, the information from fermentation. Is the yeast healthy? Are the fermenters tracking on time? Is the aroma from fermentation to your liking? Because you can tell a lot of what's going on in the distillery by using your senses, your visual, your nose, your ears. You're sensing what's going on in any area. You know, if you walk by somewhere and the pump sounds odd, you're like, hang on, someone needs to look at this because that pump's not going to last long. If you go through the fermentation area and you're noticing an aroma that's unusual, you have to pause, you have to find out what it is. It's your yeast telling you something is up because they're making some compound, some chemical structure that's giving off an odor that you may find is impossible to deal with in the distillation. And then the worst thing, a batch of rum that you can't use. So you're mindful of all of these things. So you do walk around the process to understand, use your senses to get a guide as to what is happening. At that time, I also engage with the people who I may not see on a daily basis. You know, I'll ask them, you know, how's your family? How is the weather? Did you watch the cricket match last night? Anything just to get people engaged and comfortable, like they can speak to me. And after that, we may ask about, okay, how's the job going? Is there anything I need to do or anything I need to be aware of? Let's say all of that's finished by about middle of the day, assuming there are no meetings, because meetings are part of any day. Some meetings go for several hours, some are very brief. There's engaging with customers, there's engaging with vendors, there's engaging with local agencies and the government and other things, other places. And then in the afternoon again, we have another round of say product assessment. This is now typically blends that we've done that are either going to be bottled or blends that we have to ship, or one of the most interesting ones is things that we're taking out of barrels. We're just assessing, you know, how's the aging going? Are there any special blends that we have to do with aged rum that then have to be shipped or bottled? I particularly enjoy those ones, the ones that are right out of the barrel. Sometimes there'll be a tour that we have to engage with where we're explaining in more detail about how we do things at the distillery, how's the fermentation, distillation, and aging done. I would say that second cycle of tasting and nosing is finished by about 3. And then my day is typically free to deal with anything that might have come up unexpectedly, or just to make sure the day ends in a normal fashion. So I will just again check anything that's by email, check any phone calls. I know I'm always engaging with people on the phone as well. When I first started at the distillery, there was no WhatsApp, there was no cell phone as such. So people could only reach you if you're at your desk. Now people can reach you anywhere. So they're always attempting to reach you, and there are some people that you can't ignore, and you check in with them whenever they reach out to you. So that's a typical day. Lots of nosing and tasting of rum, lots of walking around and engaging your senses with the process, a few meetings, and then responding to some emails.
I just want to add that I like that terminology. I'm gonna tell my friends and my wife, I'm not drinking rum. I'm doing product assessment.
Yeah, of course. I tell you what, I never leave work drunk or tipsy or anything. I mean, I have to drive home, so I enjoy nosing rum far more than necessarily tasting rum.
Yeah, it's true.
I can spend hours just with a wonderful rum nosing it. I don't have to taste it for too long, but the nosing is where the joy is.
It's true.
Interesting. And Don, I know you've been around more than 18, 19 years. Since I've been in the rum industry, I've known you. So
Right.
I know you've well traveled and you've seen a lot of other distilleries and places. What are some of the any interesting rum making innovations that you're aware of, or you could tell us about that exists at West Indies Rum or anywhere else that you've been around?
Oh well, Devon, I'll say my traveling hopefully is not over, because there are some rum distilleries I really want to visit. But yeah, I've been to a few. A few stand out in my time here for sure. The distillery in Peru, Ron Cartavio, and lately I did a visit to distillery in Reunion Island. Um, I got to see that part of the world, because that's on the east coast of Africa, just off the, say, south eastern coast of Africa. Out there, they're doing some interesting things, not necessarily with the rum making, but the equipment that they're using for converting their waste to energy, and also with how efficient they are with, or compact with, cooling and steam generation. So I always say at West Indies Rum, I think we are one of the better equipped distilleries in the Caribbean, and obviously we need to keep improving to be able to say that. But when I went to that one in La Reunion recently, I was pleasantly surprised that, okay, this is someone we can learn from, because that whole idea of being sustainable is so much more in the forefront than it was when I started. Energy costs are always an issue at distilleries. They're going to keep rising as well. I mean, some distilleries can say, yeah, we benefit from energy at home. We can't say that in Barbados. We have to import most of our fossil fuel requirements. And then you're like, well, okay, how can we reduce that? So looking at our waste and how we can convert that to energy is one of the key projects that we are considering. And if we can save 20% or 30% of our cost structure, I mean, yes, the business side is great, but it protects the environment as well. So those type of innovations right now is what I'm really interested to see quite a lot of. In terms of production innovations, I think what's going on in the rum industry now a lot more is premiumization. You see a lot of people understanding that, you don't just have to make one type of product and put it like 50 bottles on the shelf or 50,000 bottles on the shelf. You can really craft what you're doing. You can focus on limited edition production, single cask, small batches. That's where a lot of the value is now. You can educate people about what you do, and then tailor your products to really attract a different type of customer. I mentioned about sustainability before. Those are some of the trends that we're seeing now. A lot of people are more mindful of it. I mean, here in West Indies Rum, we're the first distillery in the Caribbean to become Bon Sucro certified, and we're proud of that. It's a chain of custody certification, so we know there's also another level. If you're a producer of cane as well, there's another level of certification with Bon Sucro. So we're looking at that at the moment. So things like that, where we want to be mindful of the business environment and also mindful of the climate and the physical environment, and mindful of our staff and mindful of all of the stakeholders, and be respectful of what they do and not engage in any practices that are going to put that to harm. Those are the innovations that we want to be sure we're always seen as being on top of. But yeah, there's been some trends in the rum industry of late that have captured my eye. One of them that was very interesting lately is how I call it the rise of the mixologist. Mixologists have always been around, but now it's like you really have to connect with a good mixologist to be able to get part of your message out there. Because if I make a rum and it can't be used in a restaurant or in a bar, and it can't create some of these special mixes, I don't think I'm going to be well loved in that world. That's almost like a new industry now. And again, this was not the case when I first started. People would go to a bar and it was pina colada or rum and coke, or rum and ginger, something that was very basic. You had to be a bartender as such. Now there's far more love for making those mixes that pair rum with food and herbs and things that historically you may not have thought of. It's a skill set in its own right, and you have to be to respect that skill. And I think that's something that will only grow more, because now it's even extended to people at home understanding how to do these mixes. They're now thinking about rum. Okay, they're no longer going to just look at a rum and think the price is what I'm going to use. They're like, okay, how is this rum made? You have to be also transparent. The fermentation technique, the length of aging. Have you added any flavor? Have you added any sugar? All of these things now are educating people, and they want to see what that rum is, because they're going to go home and do their own mixes and their own tastings. So that's the sort of innovation or evolution that you're seeing now in rum, that if you're not staying on top of, you can be left behind quite easily.
Yeah, and I'll say guilty as charged. That was my introduction to rum. My sort of entry was from the cocktail side, and
Okay.
asking what is this Demerara rum? I don't see this on my store shelves. Okay, let's go find
Exactly.
some. And then Jamaica rum, like, oh, there's different Jamaican rums. So that was sort of my entry into the space of coming from the flavor perspective, not so much like what's the cheapest thing I can put in a rum and coke, for example. So
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I didn't know that, but
yeah, that was tiki
next time,
cocktails, and
next time we see
here
each
I am
other.
talking fermentation
Exactly.
and volatile compounds and stuff. So
Oh,
great.
yeah.
So final question for you, Don, and it's a two-parter. Number one, which rum from West Indies do you think best represents what West Indies rum is capable of? And number two is, which is your personal favorite rum to drink after work?
Wow. Let me think about that a little bit. Uh, I'd say the first part of the question. I'll say it's a rum that is not known to many people. That's I'd say a mistake so far on our side, but hopefully we can make a change to that. So about this was 5 years ago now. Digger, Digger, our longest serving employee, he actually retired at the end of February. But when in 2020 he was celebrating 40 years of working at the distillery. There was another gentleman at the time who was in charge of the warehouse who was also celebrating 40 years, and another employee who was celebrating 20. So together we call it the 100 years of men. There were three men who worked at the distillery for combined 100 years. And we made a blend to celebrate that. And it was heavily biased to the pot still side. It contained about 62% pot still, which is not normal. I mean, typically you're going straight pot still, or you're doing blends that don't normally have in that percentage of pot still rum. And it then captured rum from several years and also from different stills. And the result was mind blowing. I mean, most people when they encounter it, they look at us and like, why are you not putting this into a bottle on the shelf? Because as I said, it represents for me everything the distillery is capable of. The different styles of fermentation, distillation, the ability to age, different years. Now, I would say it's one of my favorite rums. Unfortunately, I can't enjoy it every day because there's only a very limited supply of it. But if you do get a chance to come out to the distillery and you ask for that 100-year, we call it the 100-year rum. It's not 100 years, but it's just to reference the celebration that was being done. It's a fantastic. I mean, the bouquet. You don't have to drink it, Matt. You just will enjoy the nose on it. In terms of a rum that I would enjoy on the evening, I will not put that down to one rum. I'd say it could be mood specific or even company specific. There are things I more enjoy on my own. There are things I more enjoy for a group of friends. If I'm feeling celebratory, I might take a different style of rum. And that's what I love about rum. That's that versatility. I love whiskey to the point of understanding how whiskey is made and the variety. But I find that if I've tasted a whiskey, even if you give me a different one, unless it's peated, I'm not going to sense a great variation there. Rums now, I mean, I could be drinking 4 rums, like have them laid out on the table, and they seem so unique, each one of them. So the variety of rums is such that you can enjoy a style of rum today and come back tomorrow and be pleasantly surprised by how much you enjoy another style of rum. And it may be from a different country. You may be using cane juice as opposed to molasses. So I wouldn't say I have a favorite after work drink, but I do have a favorite time to spend with rum, which is right after work with friends. And I use that opportunity to introduce some of my friends to different styles of rum, different cocktails if we're spending time at the visitor center. I like blends that we do with our cut and dry mixes that are done with our cut and dry coconut rum. So I'm not a big cocktail fan, but lately I find cocktails done with cut and dry. I'm partial to. I do like coconut. I would have to say that. If you force my hand to say what's your favorite way to drink rum, it's neat. Um, at most a block of ice, but typically neat because I know I can pick up everything that's about that rum when it's neat, and maybe just a glass of water on the side. If I'm out socially, with coconut water. That as I say, coconut I like. So that's my favorite ways. Those are my favorite ways to really to drink rum.
Well, thank you, Don. I know we've run a little long here, but we've had some great content here. So we thank you for spending so much time with us and really taking us inside not only West Indies Rum Distillery, but in your own path in rum. Any final notes you want to say before we sign off?
Well, thank you again, Matt and Devon, for guiding me through it and the opportunity. It's not often I get to speak about myself and the distillery like that. And I think it's a good opportunity just, again, to encourage people who are not familiar with rum. If you're watching this, Barbados is a great place to start. And West Indies Rum, you can be sure you visit us. So I just say on behalf of the team here at the distillery, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be able to speak about West Indies Rum and myself, Donn Benn. And hopefully it's something that people enjoy watching.
Thank you again, and me and Devon will be back again soon with more of the Rum Maker series. So with that, we'll sign off. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye.